In Acts chapter 7, we find Stephen on trial for blasphemy. Stephen had done nothing wrong. He was falsely accused by the enemies of the gospel. Stephen boldly made his defense before the council. His answer demonstrated that he was no heretic. He briefly recounted significant highlights in the history of God's dealings with the nation Israel. He also recounted how, in spite of God's goodness and faithfulness to Israel, Israel historically as a nation had been unfaithful to God. Stephen pointed out to the council that they were no exception. He told them that just as their forefathers had killed the prophets, they too had killed not just a prophet, but the just one, Israel's Messiah, the Son of God. This was too much for the council members to hear. They raised their voices and covered their ears, and immediately took Stephen out to be unjustly stoned to death. Their decision to stone Stephen then was no slow, deliberate, dispassionate decision by the council. Rather, it was the unreasoned, passionate act of an angry mob. Stephen had dared to challenge them, as if they, not he, were on trial. In reality, this was exactly the case from God's perspective. They were putting Stephen on trial, but as a prophet of God, Stephen was putting them on trial for their unjust murder of the King of Glory. We also see a stark contrast between Stephen and the council. The council were really unjust and unreasonable in their murder of Stephen. Stephen, by contrast, was merciful and compassionate in praying for the forgiveness of his enemies. As he was dying, he prayed, "Lord, do not charge them with this sin." We learn a powerful lesson from Stephen's example. Christians are justified by God's mercy and grace. Because we are forgiven and justified, Christians are to be bold, not timid. We are to boldly approach God's throne of grace in worship. We are to boldly proclaim the good news of the gospel to the surrounding world. And we are to boldly forgive, just as Christ has forgiven us. Whenever we forgive others from the heart, it really demonstrates that we have received God's forgiveness rightly. It shows that we believe in the grace of God. Let's boldly tell the world this amazing news of salvation through the grace of God in Jesus Christ. Let's boldly draw near to God as reconciled friends of God. And let's boldly forgive others, just as God has so generously forgiven each of us in Christ.